Merhaba, hoş geldiniz. Good evening. Ben Ayşe Ozil. Bugünkü konuşmamız İngilizce olacak ama ben öncelikle kısa bir Türkçe giriş yapmak istiyorum. The talk today will be in English, but I would like to make a very short introduction in Turkish first. Öncelikle içinde bulunduğumuz koşullar nedeniyle herkese sağlık dileyerek başlamak istiyorum. ANAMED Kütüphanesi ve Tarih Vakfı ortaklığında çevrim içi olarak düzenlediğimiz kütüphane konuşmalarının Aralık ayı etkinliğini gerçekleştireceğiz bu akşam. Bugünkü konuşmacımız Leslie Peirce, moderatörümüz Zeynep Simavi. Leslie Peirce geçtiğimiz yıl İş Bankası Yayınlarından İngilizceden çevrilerek yayınlanan Hürrem Sultan adlı kitabı üzerine konuşacak. Öncelikle konuşmacılarımızı kısaca tanıtmak istiyorum. Leslie Peirce New York Üniversitesi'nde emekli emeritus profesördür. Çalışmaları Osmanlı Hanedanı, Osmanlı'da kadın ve hukuk konuları üzerine yoğunlaşmıştır. Daha önce yayınlanan ve çok ses getiren iki önemli kitabı vardır. Bunlardan bir tanesi Harem-i Hümayun, Osmanlı İmparatorluğu'nda Hükümranlık ve Kadınlar, Tarih Vakfı Yurt Yayınlarından yayınlanmıştır. Diğeri de Ahlak Oyunları 1540-1541, Osmanlı'da Ayintap Mahkemesi ve Toplumsal Cinsiyet. Moderatörümüz Zeynep Simavi, Amerikan İlmi Araştırmalar Enstitüsü ARIT İstanbul Direktörüdür. Daha önce Smithsonian Enstitüsü'nde görev yapmıştır. Çalışma alanları İslam sanatı üzerine tarih yazıcılığı, koleksiyonerlik tarihi ve müze çalışmalarıdır. Konuşmamıza geçmeden önce bazı teknik bilgiler aktarmak istiyorum. Konuşma 1 saat sürecek yaklaşık olarak. Bu 1 saatten sonra soru cevap kısmına geçeceğiz. Diğer kütüphane konuşmalarında olduğu gibi bu konuşma da kayıt altına alınacak ve daha sonra ANAMED'in SoundCloud sayfasında yayınlanacak. Dinleyicilerimizin görüntü ve sesleri kapalıdır. Ama ilk bir saatin sonunda soru cevap kısmına geçtiğimiz zaman dinleyicilerimiz chat fonksiyonu üzerinden Zoom sayfasının alt kısmında görebilecekleri chat fonksiyonu üzerinden sorularını yöneltebilirler. Bu soruları moderatörümüz konuşmacımıza iletecek. Sözü konuşmacılara vermeden önce bu teknik detayları İngilizce olarak da aktarmak istiyorum. So I would like to give some technical information about our talk. The talk will last for about 1 hour and then we will have a Q&A session. And this session will be recorded and will later be shared on the ANAMED SoundCloud page. Our viewers are muted and videos are off, but you can use the chat function on the lower hand side of the screen to ask questions, which will then be forwarded by our moderator to the speaker. So without further ado, I would like to leave the floor to Leslie Peirce and Zeynep Simavi, please.
Thank you very much, Ayşe. And I also would like to thank Vasia and Defne from the ANAMED Library as well, both for the invitation and organizing this event and also for this very kind introduction. And I am also very delighted to take part in this book discussion. And I'm very honored as well to be matched with Leslie Peirce. Welcome, Leslie, and thank you very much for being with us today all the way from New York.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So as Ayşe mentioned, Leslie's last book just came out of İş Bankası Kültür Yayınları last year in Turkish with the title Hürrem Sultan. But her original book was published in 2017 from Basic Books with the title Empress of the East, How a European Slave Girl Became the Queen of the Ottoman Empire. So as I was thinking about, how to start talking about this book, I was thinking about for those people in our audiences who may not have a chance to read the book yet, and thinking about if I were to summarize this book in a few sentences, how would I do that? And I thought it would be best to, maybe taking a quotation from the book itself. It is a section from a dispatch from the Genoese Bank of St. George and their Istanbul representative on the occasion of Süleyman's marriage to Roxolana, or as we know it, Hürrem Sultan in Turkish, writes these words. So he says, "This week there has occurred in the city a most extraordinary event, and one absolutely unprecedented in the history of the Sultans. The Grand Signior Süleyman has taken to himself as his Empress a slave woman from Russia. There is great talk about the marriage and none can say what it means." So I think this very first statement that you start your book with captures brilliantly and very accurately what the book is all about. Like you're looking back to this historic moment from almost 500 years later, and you're trying to give meaning to this extraordinary event, to this act of marriage. And you're trying to understand its impact for the future of the Ottoman Empire. And, you know, before we delve more deeply into a variety of themes that are explored in your fascinating book, I thought maybe we can start by talking about your reasons for writing an imperial biography of Hürrem, because I know you see this book as an imperial biography.
Well, thank you for this introduction and getting us going here. I had always thought that I would, for my third book, write a book that I wanted to write. You know, you have to, your first two books get you tenure and promotion, and then you're set. And this was a book that I really wanted to write. When I thought about what kind of a book for general readers, as opposed to academic readers, which were the first two books, I thought that the story of Hürrem and Süleyman was the best story I could tell. It has great human interest, two wonderful people with good times and bad times, and a very interesting period in the history of the Ottoman Empire. So I wrote this book. I was very lucky to have a press, not an academic press, but a press that was willing to go with me on this. So, and I was just thrilled that it was translated by İş Bankası into Turkish. So.
Yeah, and I think it also got translated into other languages as well, right? Like Estonian and Polish.
Estonian and Polish.
Yeah, so it is reaching quite a number of audiences in different languages. So, you know, if we go back to the book, you present Hürrem as a figure who disrupted the Ottoman imperial traditions on many levels, like from the concubine system to the, you know, institution of the imperial harem, from the female philanthropy, the royal patronage in the Ottoman Empire, to political and foreign affairs. Maybe, you know, we can just go chronologically and start with her beginnings at the empire. So we know that her relationship with Süleyman started in 1521, very shortly after Süleyman became the Sultan. And from the very beginning, she sets herself apart from her predecessors and other concubines that she's competing with for the attention of the Sultan. So can you tell us a little bit about the early phase of her life in the empire and in what ways that she broke away from the tradition and what it meant?
You mentioned, I think, the sound isn't perfect, but that she disrupted certain things. That she was a disruptive person in her changes. Maybe this was something that we discussed between ourselves. So I want to bring that in explaining, or at least my take on what her first years were like. I mean, first of all, we have to remember that she was a slave. I mean, she came to Süleyman as a slave, a highly trained slave, it seems to be, but she was that. We must never forget that, even though she had a great deal of power. So one of the things that was quite different in her career is that as her sons got older, it would be the job of a mother to go with the son to the province. And she never did that. and she always stayed in Istanbul. And I'll talk more about another concubine of Süleyman and her son a little later. So she stayed in Istanbul, and she stayed in the imperial palace for all of her career. So that was a quite different thing for her. Probably the biggest difference between her and other concubines before her was that Süleyman kept her with him, as I said, and she continued to have children. She continued to bear children. Now, why is that a surprise? I mean, that would be normal. A concubine, and I'm going to now say a little bit about how the life of the imperial family was laid out. So the Sultan, as you know, can have more than one concubine, and Süleyman had several. If a concubine has a son, that's the end of her sexual career with the Sultan. If a concubine, let's just take Roxolana, if she had had a daughter first and then another daughter and then a son, at that point with the son, now her little boy, she would no longer be Süleyman's concubine. So once you have a son, that's it. And why is this? This is a sort of a absolutely central rule or practice of the Ottomans, is that a mother stays with her son and trains her son and never leaves him and is with him throughout his career. And this is the great difference with Roxolana. I'm sorry, sometimes I call her Roxolana. I mean Hürrem here. She had 5 sons and a daughter and stayed with Süleyman and never went out to the provinces with her sons when they were being trained to be, possible sultans themselves. So that's very important.
And another thing is, as you mentioned, like when the concubine has the, male child, then the relationship with the Sultan is cut off. But maybe wanting to emphasize here is also the very first child that Hürrem had with Süleyman was a male child.
Was a male child.
If it was a female, then she could have continued to be with him for a while. But even though the very first child was a male, and she actually was able to continue her relationship with Süleyman, and then they were in the end up having 6 kids, and I think 5 males and 1 female.
It was male, female, male,
yeah.
male. Yes.
One thing that you talk about in the book is, the marriage of Süleyman and Hürrem, and then, they set up their own family with these, 6 children, and you call it like a, nuclear family, and which was not actually existent in the Ottoman Empire for maybe more than a century. And, as the saying goes, we say personal is political, but when we are even thinking about in the context of imperial family, all these family dynamics are even, more embedded in politics. So all these relationships, they all have political meanings. And a very interesting point that you also make in the book is, there is this very neat format that Süleyman is trying with Hürrem, creating this nuclear family with multiple kids from the same concubine, and majority of them being males, so they can be potential heirs to the throne. But then there is another set of family that Süleyman has, and that more falls under the conventional norms, which is the one that he has with Mahidevran and their son Mustafa, the only male child that he has from this concubine. And you talk about these 2 sets of families, they coexisted together. And the coexistence of these 2 different sets of families definitely created tensions in the political arena, as all the heirs would be competing with each other for the throne after Süleyman. but probably, you know, there were tensions created in other areas as well, like with the competition for the attention of the Sultan. Maybe this would be a good moment to talk a little bit about Mahidevran and Mustafa, and, you know, because they were also in a way political actors, and, you know, like what type of political dynamics that were a result of this coexistence of Hürrem and their kids, and Mahidevran and Mustafa.
Yes, this gets us into, well, actually, it gets us, first of all, into Süleyman's reproductive history. So I want to tell you a little bit about the family, or the children that he fathered. So when you're still a prince, you start reproducing. So Süleyman had a number of different concubines. His first, he had several boys and then one girl, right? So we want to now talk about one of the families. He had, let's say, I don't remember the exact number, 2 or 3 concubines with sons. And then along comes a new concubine. Her name is Mahidevran, her Turkish name. Her Ottoman name is Mahidevran. And he has a son, Mustafa. This is the mother and son that Zeynep is talking about, came along. And this was before he became Sultan. He's doing this when he's a prince. And so the mother and the son are a pair, a solid pair, and she stays with that son throughout his career. When he becomes Sultan, shortly he meets, or he is given, or somehow he comes along with Hürrem. There is a great epidemic within the palace, and several of these little boys die. There's one daughter as well. They die, and the only child that is left standing from before Hürrem is Mustafa. So Mustafa is the oldest now potential heir to the throne. And then you have Mehmet, the first child of Hürrem. Now, normally, because she has a boy, starting out with a boy, that's it. She won't sleep with Süleyman anymore. She's now the mother of a son. That is her role. But Süleyman calls her back, and he calls her back again and again. And she has these other children. So this is very, very disturbing for some people within the empire, but he changes these rules here. So now he's got his own son, and then later these other 4 sons. One is physically impaired, and so he can never, this Cihangir, he can never really be the Sultan, and one dies in infancy. So he's got now three boys with the same mother, which is a complete new situation and a troublesome new situation. So some people were very upset about this. So where are we going with this? It's quite a different situation. Mahidevran and Mustafa follow an old pattern. The old pattern is when the prince reaches the age of 18 or so, he goes with his mother to a provincial city. In this case, it's Manisa, where he will first go. And there's a palace there, and he learns, he's a local governor, and he learns the arts of ruling. Ruling is the wrong word here, of governing, and is there also as a military resource. If Süleyman needs to go to war, he's called up with his. So that's Mustafa's career, and that's a traditional career. I mean, that's the way it was. With Hürrem, you have this problem, you know, what are her boys going to do? And eventually they go out without their mother. They go to their provinces, the 3 who are potential heirs to the throne. And she goes around and visits them. That's the good thing that she does. She does get out and sees them, and those are wonderful episodes to write about. I don't know if readers will think that those are exciting, but I loved writing about when she went traveling and gets out of Istanbul and so forth. So this is a tension between these two situations. Did I answer?
Yes, you did very well. And maybe another thing that we can point out is you also very beautifully talk about the kind of imbalances, because, you know, Mahidevran, she kind of dedicates her whole life as a tradition to the training of her son to become an eligible and a fitting candidate to the throne. And while she was dedicating her whole life there, there was Hürrem, whose attention was kind of split between multiple children, but at the same time, Mustafa kind of started his career also kind of early on in the provinces, right? Whereas with Hürrem's children, their sons, they start off their career a little bit later in the provinces. They are kind of in their, I think, 20s.
What would you like me to elaborate on?
If there is anything that you would like to, you know, like point out in this imbalance that I have missed that you would like to add, if not, we can move on to another question.
I don't think I have more to add, but there's something I want to say. You know, the person we should really be talking about who might be stressed, perhaps the wrong word, is Hürrem. I mean, she I don't know what the conversations with Süleyman would have been like. Also, Süleyman's mother was a very powerful and apparently a very astute and kind person. So she would have been there in the palace having discussions what should be happening here now that we have this new situation with, you know, all these kids. And she's, talk about this later, but she's given many new responsibilities that Mahidevran would not have had. I mean, she's kind of a queen in the palace. She has many duties, and she's expected to do things that queen mothers do, but she does it as the wife or the concubine and wife. So she's a very busy person, keeping this all up in the air. So that's the background. She has lots of duties. So does Mahidevran, but they're typical. Everybody knows them. They're classic. So I do think about her. You know, should my kids go? Should my boys go? Should they not go? I just want to, you know, give her some empathetic attention here. And so there must have been a lot of discussions here.
Yeah.
Mehmet, her first son, was not sent out to the provinces. I think I don't remember, it's 20 or 21. That's a little bit older. This is a sidebar, but it's a very important sidebar. So I want to bring that in. I mean, meanwhile, the public is having a great deal to think about what these changes mean, what's going on. And she starts to be called a witch, and that she has bamboozled Süleyman. You know, she has somehow made him sort of as if he has to pay attention to everything she wants him to do. I mean, she's in control of him. Not everybody is thinking this, but some people are thinking this, and they're beginning to call her a witch. This on the street. You don't hear that, by the way, I need to correct that. You don't hear this on the street. The Venetian ambassadors in Istanbul tell you lots of things when they write back home to the Venetian government. So that was kind of a mixed up segue here, but I do want to say that we hear about what the populace of Istanbul is thinking here. So
I think this is a very, you know, well-connected link to the next discussion point, because as you say, you know, like the whole book is actually on Hürrem Sultan, and you also mentioned that she's been a very elusive character in the book, because as you say, there is really not much written about her in the Ottoman records. As you know, you don't really talk about another man's woman, especially if that woman is the wife or the favorite of the Sultan. And the only, you know, records that we have is from the European diplomatic sources. But another thing that you do so brilliantly in the book is, you know, by looking into her philanthropic work, you in a way reconstruct her inner life from the clues here or there that you find in the archival records. So while you're giving us a very good portrayal of her public image at the time, through her charity work, through her endowments, you're also able to reconstruct her personality. And, you know, some of the examples that you give were actually quite touching, because you can actually see her as a woman with a slave background, and you make her very relatable in those chapters. So maybe this is a good moment to talk about her philanthropy, because again, this is another arena that she transformed female patronage in the Ottoman Empire. And also, what does her philanthropy tell us about her personality?
The philanthropy, as you say, is quite wonderful, because stemming from the work that she does, which is not new. Other queen mothers, concubine mothers were expected to engage in philanthropy. Hers is quite different, and we get some real insight into that. And I think that's one of two areas in which she probably was able to project empathy for people of the empire. So it's a different side. We also hear her speaking, not literally speaking, but the document she writes. So women were the mothers of royal children, were expected to engage in philanthropy. The treasury would, you know, forward plenty of money to them. Who did that? It was the mothers out in the provinces with their sons, Mahi Defran, for example, women like that. So if you go to Manisa, Konya, various places where Ottoman princes would have been sent to learn the trade, you will see, I have only seen the structures in Manisa, the area of Manisa, but there are these wonderful, great projects. Külliye, everybody knows Külliye, kind of a collection of a mosque, often a soup kitchen to, you know, feed the poor, a madrasa, various kinds of other dependent buildings. And so these women were expected to do this, the mothers of the sultans, out in the provinces. The big change with Suleiman and Roxolana is that she, not going out, she is the one who is busy with building these complexes. And she starts out with one in right in Istanbul. You know, he's not letting her go, or she's staying there and doing her work. And you can visit this Külliye, you can visit this mosque complex. It's in the Haseki district of Istanbul. And I'll just say a little bit about that. I have a whole chapter on that in the book, a very long chapter, because there's a lot of good information. I got to visit it with an architect, so it was very good. Anyway, she builds a very modest mosque, and she's still young. She's Suleiman has married her at this point, 15 years into their relationship, he marries her. And there are a lot of stories about she doesn't sleep. These are fake stories, I think, fake news. She won't sleep with him until, you know, he lets her build a complex and lets her get going with us. So that's not true, but it's in the stories here. So because she's not yet really a queen-like figure, it's a modest mosque. It's a quite modest mosque. But in the square across the street from it, the buildings are quite excellent, absolutely wonderful. She starts out with a school, a primary school for kids. And it's very special because it has a double roof, and that's something very precious about it. And then the next thing she builds is this madrasa. And the madrasa, as you know, is for training young men in the law and tenets of religion. And so she has the madrasa. The next thing then, and the next thing, and the next thing. The next thing then is a soup kitchen. And this was really fun to learn about. And there's just good information about it. I better stop talking about it. And so that's there. I learned something about a soup kitchen. I forgot the Turkish word now.
İmaret?
Imaret. Not only do people of the neighborhood get to come and stand in line and get some foods, there are special people 24 people who get to sit there and have their meal. And so a lot of description about that. And then 10 years later, a hospital is added. Hospitals they're not as regularly built or endowed as you might think. And this is a very big thing. And I just won't go into the details, but the details are really very interesting. So buy the book and read about the hospital. So I loved writing about this whole complex of hers. And it was a quite thriving place. You might ask, why is it in the district of Haseki, pretty far out from the center of Istanbul? And this is nothing particular to Süleyman, but you know, it wasn't that long since the Byzantines fell apart and the Ottomans conquered the city. Mehmet, the conqueror, conquers the city. And so parts of the city were still needing to be refurbished, still needing attention. And one thing about these mosque complexes is they create jobs. The very building of the complex creates jobs for people. And then you think about all the services that the Külliye will need, you know, delivery of food, delivery of wood for burning, for cooking. I mean, just so it's a kind of an urban revival phenomenon. This isn't really important to the book, but I think it's very important to know. So that's why she has that job. And then she gets larger and larger sort of projects. Did I go off track? Do you want me to mention one of them or pick up?
No, but maybe, you know, we can talk a little bit about the, you know, the selection of the location as very strategically, because it's a place where there is Avrat Pazarı and also all the other endowments that she established in other parts of the empire outside Istanbul were, you know, as you say, seem to be pretty strategically picked up by her, like Mecca and Medina. So she, I think, works on her public image in a very political way as well. Am I saying correct? By, you know, is that
So.
correct interpretation of?
I think so. The work in Medina, Mecca, was together with Süleyman. And I think that, I mean, while he was doing things, she was doing things. And I don't know at that point if she's like, I want to be a part of this. Okay, can I do this with you? Or he's like, we're going to do this together. They might have done it together because this, going back in history, Harun al-Rashid, who was one of the first caliphs, he and his very famous wife were great endowers. So, you know, if you wanted to say, wow, you know, Hürrem and Süleyman are, you know, great patrons here, patrons, you're going to say, just like Harun al-Rashid and his wife. So there's that. So I just want to mention the last one, the last large structure endowment she made was in Jerusalem. And that's big time. I mean, moving to Jerusalem, Mecca and Medina, fine. Jerusalem, where pilgrims will be moving quite frequently, every year. She has very interesting structure there. It's not a mosque complex. It's based around a hostel, and you know, where people can come and stay. And then there's a structure where people who I don't know a good word here, but people who are sort of religious struck by Jerusalem and want to stay in Jerusalem and want to stay near the holy areas. So there's a place for them to live. It's still in operation today. This structure is still in operation today. It's last I heard from a friend of mine in Jerusalem, is a soup kitchen again. So that was a big one for her. I mean, I'm not the right person to say why Jerusalem is more special, say, than Mecca and Medina. But I think the pilgrimage and the movement through the city was very important. So by the end of her career, she and Süleyman were lauded as great patrons, co-patrons.
And we can say that it was also, she set herself as a role model for their daughter Mihrimah and other female patrons as well. Like you see this kind of female patronage legacy in the continuing generations of the Ottoman imperial women, right? They follow on the steps of Hürrem. And
I have to give a lot of credit here to Süleyman. I want to just repeat this again. Is that he really enabled his female relatives. It was like we're going to start here in Istanbul, and I want you women, or they're like, we want to do it, let us do it. So I think the two of them here are really working I don't know if they work hand in hand, but they are pushing something together.
Yeah, no, definitely. That was also another point that you make in the book. Is Süleyman actually starts for his own complex Süleymaniye quite late, because he had to construct this tomb and monument for his favorite son Mehmet I. But then also Hürrem had her own complexes, and then his sister Shah Sultan and Mihrimah. Everyone was it was an era of royal patronage by the family, but Süleyman was kind of, waiting maybe, for those construction projects to kind of to their completion or whatever. I mean, he really, as you say, maybe, allowed these women to have more of to be a little bit more on the foreground in terms of imperial building activities.
I'm not sure I would use the word allowed, because I do think that the women were eager to do it. And in the case of Shah, his sister, Shah Sultan, and Hürrem, pushing to get to do this. And Mihrimah is probably saying, me too, I get to do this. Everybody knows her mosque in Üsküdar, right? Or her mosque complex in Üsküdar. Yes. She has one near, I think it's Edirne Kapı, which is also quite splendid. So, yeah. I think, I guess this is sort of obvious, and it's kind of what you're saying too, but I mean, if he's changing the system of reproduction and he's having the queen in the city living and not necessarily going out to the provinces with her son, this kind of seems to be a natural move. I do have to say that I think his mother was very influential too. I mean, her magnificent. I just wanted to put one in for her. She is doing a quite huge project in Manisa, near Manisa. So it seems to be a family enterprise. But without Süleyman, it probably wouldn't have happened, right?
Yeah. So maybe moving on from family life and, the public works like the philanthropy in the empire to another era, to another arena that Hürrem pioneered and excelled was, the political and foreign affairs. For example, the quotation that I shared at the very beginning of this discussion shows that she was on the radar of foreign diplomats as the Sultan's favorite and then the wife. But Hürrem was not only those, or she was not only a subject matter in those foreign correspondences, she also became a political agent herself. For example, when Süleyman was campaigning and the sons were in the provinces, she was the one sitting in the capital. And also she was corresponding with the European royal families. So she almost undertook this role of a queen, though she never maybe received the official title of queen. But she also set it as a role model for others too, especially to her daughter Mihrimah. So can you talk a little bit about this? Like, what type of an image do we get of Hürrem as a political agent, as a correspondent with the foreign European royal families, and what type of an example she sets, especially for the other imperial women to follow?
Once again, this seems to be a family project, but she is a great pioneer pushing forward. I don't know that much about his mother, but it strikes me that she was probably in communication as well. Somebody needs to write about Hafsa Sultan. Somebody really has to write that book or think about her. But certainly, along with the other things, the other promotions or what do I want to say, drawing on the contributions of the women of the family. This is, as you say, another arena. So Poland is important in these communications. The Polish king keeps a peace with the sultans, even though sometimes he gets engaged with in enterprises that are not useful for the Ottomans, but they try to keep this alliance going. We haven't talked much about Hürrem's origins, but in the second chapter, I try to figure out, what we can know about that. Is that she was probably from Ruthenia, which is in today's Ukraine. And that would mean, and the Polish-Lithuanian, I'm not very good at this history here, but that area was part of their domain. So in a sense, you could say she was a subject of the Polish king. Anyway, this fiction, if it was a fiction, is kept up. And so the family, Suleiman writes, at one point, Mihrimah writes a letter to the Polish king. There's a correspondence going back and forth, and that's important there. And so that she's been up to, and it's a little more formal, I think, than the other things that I want to tell you about. But she does write, no, I'm not entirely right there. She does have at least some correspondence with the daughter of the Polish king here, with Isabella, who's married to somebody else and, was the queen of Hungary, and then everything falls apart and there's fighting, and I won't go into the history here, but then all of a sudden Isabella has this new little boy, and what's happening? Hürrem moves in. I want to use the term here, moves in. I don't know if she's called upon to do it, but it looks like she says opportunity. And she writes this amazing letter to Isabella, or amazing to me. And she's like, Isabella, I just go, be on my side. In other words, follow the Sultan. And she just gets at the end of the letter. She's like, come on, our guy, Suleiman, he's your man, don't go anywhere else. But she's writing things like, we are both women. We are all the children of the same God. Okay. And she goes on with this language, and we all should follow the same man, Suleiman. So it's a kind of propagandistic, kind of a little bit of pressure here. I just want to say one more thing about this. I guess I do want to say this one more thing, and then sort of close with the correspondence. Isabella's mother turns out to be an extremely interesting person. I'm not going to make a whole big sideline here. I learned about her when I was in Poland at a conference on queens who failed, if you can imagine that conference, queens who failed. And her mother was from Italian, one of the Italian city-states. Anyway, they're writing back and forth, and she's writing to Bona Sforza, and you don't have a letter back from Bona Sforza. So she's cultivating. Suleiman is probably like, go, go, go. This is great. We need these people. But Bona does things for the Ottomans too. I don't think anybody knows about Bona Sforza, or if I'm patting myself on the back here, I apologize, but somebody needs to work on Bona Sforza too. Somebody needs to work on this relationship, write a whole book on the relationship. Anyway, yes. I guess I'll stop there.
Okay. Well, since we have maybe only 10 minutes left, and then we can move on to the questions from the audience. And I see, one by one, they're coming along. But I thought maybe we can end our discussion with Hürrem's legacy, because as you say, in the introduction to the book, she has become one of the most intriguing and probably one of the most vilified figures in history. But as you also mentioned, she was not really written about during her own lifetime. And all this image of her, the perception we have of Hürrem is actually from the Ottoman historical records that really succeed her after her times, or it's through other external sources like the diplomatic correspondence. But in your work, you, in a way, try to, shift this image by putting the focus back to her, by kind of analyzing her concrete actions. like her agency, rather than, her assumed intentions that we may not really know. For example, one of the very, commonly known misconceptions was, as you say, she was the one who actually sent Mahidevran and Mustafa away to the provinces, whereas actually it was not the case. It was already a set Ottoman tradition that the mother of the prince would accompany the prince to the provinces. So you're kind of also, focusing on the actions of Hürrem, but by also providing the imperial and global context that she had to navigate through. You're trying to give a more maybe accurate image of her. So maybe as a final word, what would you like to re-emphasize about Hürrem's legacy? I mean, we've been talking about all her, philanthropic work, her agency in the political and foreign affairs, and also how she changed the family dynamics and the succession system in the Ottoman Empire. But what would be your, what would be one thing that you would like to re-emphasize for the contemporary readers about Hürrem's legacy and her significance?
Well, I hope that the philanthropy, the sort of international context, international reputation, this is important and that should stick in your minds. The whole reproductive system, the structure of the family with her was problematic. And I have an epilogue in the book, and you can see the change beginning with Süleyman's successor, who is Selim II. I want to say that he has a bad reputation. Sarhoş Selim, is that still mentioned for him? I think he was a pretty solid guy when he becomes, he doesn't have a good press. He needs somebody to write a book about him too. But anyway, he makes some changes. He keeps a favorite, but he does not give his favorite great power. So you don't see a queen power, although his favorite and other wives will become important. So that doesn't happen. But a legacy, what do I want to say? Architectural legacy here in terms of the old palace and politics is something I want to talk about. I don't think I worked this in before. So I'm going to backtrack here. And I know we only have 8 minutes now. So the concubines, royal concubines, even after they start to have children, live in a place called the Old Palace. Süleyman lives in the New Palace. It's called the New Palace. There are no women in the New Palace. There is a small area where women can stay, and I always figure that's where somebody visits. Maybe he wants his concubine to come over, or his mother is going to come and stay. Hürrem moves into the New Palace slowly. And by the time she is, a queen, she has quarters there. Over the rest of the century and into the 17th century, those quarters become larger. There are more women there. There are women now living there, although they may go back to the old palace. This is the foundation of a political wing within the Topkapı Palace, within the New Palace. And this is her doing with the help of Süleyman and presumably maybe, his mother, you don't know. So that's a huge political change. I think that may be her lasting and biggest contribution, is that women now get a voice. And when you look at the 17th century, you will see where queen mothers, it's the queen mother, back to the queen mother, not the favorite. So that's a huge one I want to talk about. I wanted to say something about that there. So she was a game changer.
Definitely on many levels. Yeah, you're so right. Well, since we are receiving quite a number of questions, so maybe I can just move on to the questions from the audience. So let me see. So there's one. People always see this male-female child issue as personal choices and the result of love. On the other hand, there was a major epidemic that costed Süleyman several children before Roxolana, I'm curious about your opinions about why Süleyman chose Roxolana as his reproduction partner over Mahidevran or any other concubine. So it's like, why Hürrem?
Okay. Well, Mahidevran's gone because she now has a son. So I guess he could have called her back, but he didn't change things with her. Whether he had a plan or whether he just was obsessed with Hürrem, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The two chapters, I'm going to sidetrack. The two chapters that were hardest for me was to explain why this change happened. And I thought, did Hafsa Sultan, did his mother say something here? And the second was the killing of Mustafa. I guess we won't get into that. Süleyman grew up in a very tense time. His father killed several of his brothers to get to the throne. This is Yavuz Selim the First. So he grew up with a tremendous amount of violence around him, and many of his uncles were executed and killed. So there was a lot of violence there. And you can say in part that's the result of this multiple reproducing system. And he gets rid of that. It gets changed a little bit with Selim II, but I think that so there's that. He's thinking about change. What can he do to reduce this sort of internal violence? And then he may, and then there's the whole thing about Hürrem, is that he may simply have fallen in love with her and just wasn't going to let her go. You have to give, Henry VIII did some pretty crazy things in that time. Kings did play with their reproductive options. So I'm just going to say those two things. I think policy, and three things. His experience growing up and not wanting to live through that kind of thing again, which of course they did. The boys did, end up in a conflict later. But yeah, I guess I'll stop there.
Okay. There's another question that I think we covered, but maybe you would like to add one or two more. Is there any evidence of Hürrem having any influence on policy, domestic or foreign affairs? Any particular example that you would like to point out, though I know we talk about this?
We don't have a lot of specific evidence here. A personal aspect here, she didn't want him to keep going into Anatolia to fight with the Iranians. And so I think there were policy issues, but can't you do this? Can't you whatever? We don't have any evidence of that. But I imagine that they talked together. She was such a smart woman, and she was on top of everything, and her philanthropic and her, correspondence. She knew stuff. So I'm quite sure that I'm confident that he talked to her. I can't think of any particular policy that she would have harangued him on. Oh, don't do this, don't do that. But I think she was an influential advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something here?
Yeah, of course.
He was gone for something like, if you added it all up, 13 years of their marriage. Did I get that right? She's writing him all the time. And the letters are in Turkish, Çağatay Uluçay. Çağatay Uluçay, if you want to go get the books. I think they're back in print. They're wonderful. And he's got all their letters there. She's also sitting in Istanbul with a lot of news. I think I'm just repeating what I'm saying, is that she knows stuff that's going on. Süleyman talked to his mother about politics too. You don't have a lot of evidence of that. So I think, wise consultant, sitting in Istanbul when everybody's talking about everything, and
Okay, this question is about something that we haven't covered, so it's very, to the point. How do you assess the slavery system in the Ottoman Empire in general? I know you talk about this a lot at the beginning of the book, about Hürrem's beginning.
Well, it just finished in June a small book on slavery and captivity, and it is coming out with Central European University Press. So I have a small book on that. Islamic slavery is not like slavery in the United States. It's not the slavery of the South. There are a lot of rules. There's emancipation, freeing slaves. I mean, I want to emphasize that. It's a part of the Islamic system, that it's a good thing to free your slaves and then look after them after. So what should could you remind me of the question?
It's just how do you assess the slavery system in the Ottoman Empire in general? So it's just a
It was slavery. It was a slavery. It was one form of slavery, but I do think it was more benign, had rules. And, the emancipation, I just want to repeat that, this can end up in freedom. And there's a sort of, not pressure, but encouraging owners of slaves. And we have women in there too. Women, emancipation is a good thing.
Another question that we have is, do you think aristocracy rules are used against to bourgeoisie, especially in a political way by Hürrem?
Could you read it again, please?
Yeah, it just says, do you think aristocracy rules are used against bourgeoisie, especially in a political way by Hürrem?
I'm not sure that I quite understand.
Yeah, me either. Maybe
aristocratic.
If you can maybe reframe your question once again, because it's aristocracy rules are used against the bourgeoisie in a political way by Hürrem. So I don't think that I also make any sense. I mean, if you can reframe your question and ask again, maybe we can go back to this. Another question is actually about Hürrem's luxury consumption. Do we know anything about that in the Ottoman court, about Hürrem's luxury consumption?
Well, it was quite great. It would have been for all women in the court system. And it would have been for the sultans. I mean, they were great absorbers of magnificent costumes. I mean, you read about Pargal Ibrahim. Oh my goodness. So many clothes. And so, I mean, living luxuriously was a sign of being the rulers, the ruling class. This may not be particularly pertinent, but I think it's really important here. All women in the old palace were trained to sew and do embroidery, and that includes Hürrem Sultan. And when this, crazy guy, I shouldn't be saying it like this, but this, angry brother of the Shah of Iran comes over to Istanbul and he wants Suleiman to, have a war with him against his brothers. I mean, she gives him hand embroidered gifts, and her women do hand embroidered gifts. So, I mean, everybody needs a trade. And somewhere I read, I don't remember, is that when, these aging concubines or aging members of the court, what do? They have a trade to save themselves with. So I don't know if I think there's certainly a classless aspect to this. Every woman needs to know how to sew and can do this. And so that's what I have to offer about it. This is a really interesting question.
Yeah. And what is your point of view on the other imperial women, such as Hürrem Sultan?
My first book, I mean, in Hürrem, I'm sorry, Muhteşem Yüzyıl was pretty good, and I thought that the Hürrem was not quite so great. She's a powerful woman, just an amazing woman. She's a second, can I say, don't repeat this, a second Hürrem.
Well, the next question is about what do you think of the Turkish series Muhteşem Yüzyıl?
You're going to allow that.
Yeah.
I wrote about it. Okay, so I got to go to the set. I knew about it and I was still working on the book, and I got to go to the set, and I met Suleiman. I talked to Suleiman for like a whole hour. And then I talked to Mihrimah, which was just amazing. it was just great. I got to talk to the directors, you know, what their goal was. I mean, my Turkish was really good then. So I watched the entire thing. I watched the death of Mustafa again and again. I love, and most of us who teach Ottoman history here show the beginning of a segment 1. When you watch her being, I assume everybody's watched this, her captivity, Portugal, Ibrahim's captivity. I mean, they start right out there with the brutality of enslavement, you know, and the resistance of both of these people, and then who go on to the highest possible. So I learned from it. I'm not going to say it's great theater, but yeah.
So there is another question.
Does the question asker want to say whether he or she?
The person who asked the question.
Yes,
okay.
Is that fair? The arbitrator.
Well, from the name I can't really tell, but it's not a Turkish participant. No, I guess not. I mean, the name is. So the other question is on the Hürrem's actually legacy. Let me find where I was. In the meantime, okay. This is another question is all about Hürrem's political image. What can you say about Hürrem's political image? You know, how it changed after her death in the 17th century in particular, and what was her legacy for the following imperial women, and have she really be a model and impact on the following sultanas? I think we covered this a little bit, but if you wanna make a particular mention of 17th century.
I don't know if the women who succeeded her as queen mothers, as powerful wives, I don't know if they thought, wow, we owe a lot to Hürrem. She was the one. But I think she would have been unforgettable. And I think people would have known, you know, with approval and maybe disapproval that she was a powerful person. But then maybe, you know, you have one powerful woman and then the next one and the next one, and there's a whole string. And whether they look back and say, she did this, but this one did that. I mean, can you imagine women sitting around, just ordinary women, and then women who were being trained for political office thinking about this?
Yeah.
I wish we knew the answer to that.
Mm. So there's another very interesting question about the Western fascination with Hürrem. So where do you think it comes from, the Western fascination with Hürrem, and why might she have been represented rather negatively in many cases in early modern Western literature?
Well, I think the first thing to say is there was a lot of watching, you know. I mean, the English are knowing what's going on because they're having all kinds of people talk to them. They will find out. They have their own people. All 17th century, various English men are writing about everything. So she's watching. I'm sure that she is watching the English queens. She knows. I mean, her successor is corresponding with Catherine de Medici, and de Medici is like, bring your partner over here. We got to get together. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but I mean, they know each other very well. And I've never come across anything as, wow, what do you think about your predecessor? You don't hear references back, but they know about her.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the love stories, all the tales about Süleyman and Hürrem. I think she was probably unforgettable.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder whether anyone before her actually made it into the foreign correspondence, because as you say, she was definitely talked about even before she became the wife as the favorite of the Sultan. there's this only one woman that the Sultan constantly sees, and then the marriage becomes a subject matter in one of the dispatches. So from the very beginning, it looks like there was this this interest about maybe, is it a real love story or what is this about it? Because, it's called as an unprecedented event in the history of sultans. That's why she's presented. So that's even, maybe one reason for fascination, that it's just so unique and stands on its own that they cannot really make a meaning out of it, right?
We do have to remember that up until Hürrem, you don't have a powerful queen. I mean, nobody's in position, right, except for the queen mother. She's the one. She's the number one woman. And now we have queen mothers and favorite concubines following. Yeah. So I should know the answer to that. There must be a study out there. I will say that by the end of the 16th century, the Queen Mother then is corresponding with Elizabeth I, famous Elizabeth I, and they're exchanging clothes. And, Elizabeth sends a great organ, which is still somewhere in the Topkapı Palace. So it's that level, the Queen Mothers. The Queen and the Queen Mothers of the Ottomans. So it keeps on going. It's in my first book. Some of that correspondence is there. It's really cool. I don't mean to be promoting the book. I just want to say it's there. Okay.
So what does your book reveal or explore that is new in terms of sources that you use that had not been explored before, or themes that put together known information in a new interpretation?
I think I'll have to look. I think the only new material was what I learned in Poland about Bona Sforza and that angle. It's a very small part of the book. It was very exciting to me. I read a lot for this book that I didn't for the first book, but I think the new wow information was the Bona Sforza.
Mm-hmm. So this is about your personal opinion on the execution of Ibrahim Pasha. Do you think it was Hürrem who caused it?
She may have been a voice in the decision, but I don't think it was her igniting Suleiman against Ibrahim. That was hard to write too. That was a section that was very hard for me. I have to bring my son into this. When I freak out, this is probably embarrassing my son, but I call him. He's been with the Ottomans since he was 11, traipsing around taking pictures for me. So I have to, yay for him. What did you ask me? I completely forgot here.
Oh, I asked about, the execution of Ibrahim Pasha. So in your personal opinion, do you think that it was Hürrem who caused it?
Yeah, yes, I got it. We had to have a conversation about that, but but the big conversation with my son, since I've already drawn him in here, was the killing of Mustafa, the execution of Mustafa by his father. That was very hard for me to write. I had to make a decision. Historians don't go there. They just don't want to go there, I think.
So this one, I think we kind of already answered, but this is about what did being his wife mean? Did they live together as a family as we would understand it, or was it more that her personal status was raised and he no longer had other concubines?
What was the beginning of the question?
What did being his wife mean? So what does it mean to be the wife of Suleiman? Is it like they lived together as a family, as we understand it today, or was that just her personal status was raised and he no longer had any other concubines?
Family life. What was family life? With Henry VIII, the Grand English, you kind of know that they were in the same palace, and they probably did have dinner together. Let's see. Well, the boys Mihrimah will stay with her mother in the old palace, right? Until Mihrimah is married and at a very young age, 17, I think. Not young for then. The sons will move over eventually. You know, they can grow up there in the old palace. I mean, they have teachers and so forth and so on. I don't know exactly when they might move into their father's palace. You see a miniature or two of Suleiman dining with Mustafa. You know, are they called in to be with their father? I mean, I don't know the answer to how often do they see their parents. I think in the old palace, there would have been much more contact with their mother because she has her own suite of rooms, you know, and I'm sure the kids are coming in and they're all having dinner together. I just imagine that. That's Muhtasham, that's the Muhtasham Yusuf. So the boys, up until, I shouldn't be calling them the boys, the princes. I mean, up until Hürrem, they're going off, they're with their mother, they're going off at 17 or 18. So that's their life, they're separated. I don't know much more about that. I mean, does Suleiman call them all in and come on, it's time to talk with dad, or let's all go hunting together? I can tell you that he would go, he was a great favorite of the hunt. Suleiman liked to go hunting, maybe just because he could get out. And so I think he took the boys with him. When he would go on campaign, he would take the boys with him. But that's not answering the question about family life. I think there were different ways of having partial family lives.
Okay, so this is a great question. It's about your experience of writing a book for popular audiences, especially in the light of a very recent discussions on the place of the Ottoman history among popular history writing around Alan Mihail's book. What do you make of the popular as well as the academic receptions of your book?
Well, like I said at the very beginning, I wanted to write a popular book. I mean, it's not a popular book in the sense that millions of people are going to buy it. So I got an agent whose grandparents are buried in a, you know, he's got Turkish roots. So the agent helps me. He was looking for somebody to write a book about Hürrem. This is like unbelievable. So the agent then pitches the book, and it was bought by a press called Basic Books. And they do what they call high-end publications, meaning that this kind of a book is not going to be a bestseller, but until it, you know, whoops, that was a meanie thing to say. You know, there's a certain clientele for people who want to read serious fiction. So I was writing for that audience, and I had 3 different people go through the book, and my you know, the owner of the was my own particular editor. So I'll just tell you one story about this. She said, I don't want to read it until you finish the whole thing. Okay, I finished the whole thing and I send it to her. She writes me right back. You have 28, I had them count, 28 times you say perhaps. You can't do perhaps when you're working for Basic Books. In other words, the historian in me was like wanting to say, not really sure here, but looking like. And that was extremely hard for me to stop thinking that way, and just when I was pretty sure it was true, I just said it, sort of as fact. So that's what that was like. It was really interesting when they're like, you need more of this, or you need less of this, or you've got to talk about sex more. Got to talk about sex more. Okay, how am I supposed to do that? What do we even know? So it was very, very interesting, and I am extremely happy I was able to work with them. I think that more people should, I don't know about the Turkish book market, but more people should write books that are, you know, academically accurate, but for high-end readers, if you want to call it like that. Maybe there is more. I don't know. What would you say? But that's my experience.
Okay. So what do you think about the visibility of the Ottoman imperial women in specific and women in general in the Ottoman historiography?
I think women, oh gosh, this is a hard one. I've been in the field too long. I mean, you would hear about I wish I had a class of students here. You would hear about individual women. I mean, you always heard about Hürrem, right? But I don't think that they got into historical writing as actors until 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when we started to get really interested in women's history. Is that part of the question I should?
Yeah, I mean, it's just, in the Ottoman historiography, the visibility of Ottoman imperial women and women in general, do they really exist? Yeah, probably this is like really female women's history or minority even histories are really taken up quite late in the Ottoman history or any other history in the world. It's been always the history of winners or history of rulers. But when you look into the history of anyone other than the man in power, I mean, I'm sure there are sources out there, as you were able to, put it together for Hürrem's Imperial Biography. But it's just, academics working on these topics, as you say, it's probably the work of the past 20, 30 years.
I think so. I mean, I think Hürrem would probably get in the books. She would get in the book. I'm just speculating.
Mm-hmm.
Who did something very bad for the Ottomans. She got the best guy killed. What would have happened if Mustafa had been the Sultan? People wanted to think that the great glorious days of the Ottomans might have gone on. So I think she would have appeared there. Yeah, 30 years. I think there's one reason why, when I didn't go into academia until I was 45. And I'll just tell you this little story. I was older, right? And so I had to have a topic, and I told my, main professor, I want to write about the imperial harem. He said something like harem shmarem, there's no information. Come back with a new topic. I changed advisors. Advisor says to me, oh, I've got I'm very interested in that topic. Do you know if you work on this topic, you have to know about the damats? I don't even know what the word damat meant then, So, I mean, there were two attitudes then, and that was 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, actually, that really answers the question really well. That just one personal anecdote is quite telling.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah. So, well, it's good. And, it happened in Turkey. It happened in the United States. I mean, I guess the whole world is pretty much,
So this one is again on Hürrem. Did Hürrem exercise her power against the members of the empire by partnering commercial groups and local administrative religious people?
I don't think that I don't know of any instances like that.
I mean, one thing that you mentioned is she's definitely aligning with the other women in the harem, kind of, gaining support for herself in the harem institution when she's rising to the level of Süleyman's favorite. But again, it's a female sphere of power, right?
Could you read the question again, please?
So the question is, let me go back. Did Hürrem exercise her power against the members of the empire by partnering commercial groups and local administrative religious people?
I don't know if she made moves like that, favoring one group commercially. I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
So there's another question about Süleyman's crown. The construction projects of Süleyman's family reminds me of the crown that Süleyman brought for himself for legacy. Gürü Necipoğlu wrote about the representation of power in Ottoman context, and Süleyman called himself king. Sultan and Shah in order to represent whole empire and its subjects, as well as international representation. So I see a parallel with this and the construction process that was greater than before. What do you think about that?
Can you please, put that in 1 or 2 sentences for me as you understand?
Okay, so this is like the construction projects of the Süleyman's family, and also
Construction project. Can we stop here? This is the changes he made in the structure and functioning of the, of the ruling class here, of the ruling family. Okay.
So there's also the crown, the Western style crown that he had, which Guru Necip also wrote about as representation of power in the Ottoman context. And, Süleyman was calling himself the king, the sultan, and the shah. Do you see a kind of a parallelism between probably using this crown as a symbol, as an image, and also this, huge construction work that was happening? Like both of them were maybe used for the same purpose, to showcase his imperial power as the king, as the Shah, as the sultan. I guess this is what the question is about. Like, is there a parallelism between these two?
Well, Süleyman was, patently, obviously, really on, what do I want to say? Concrete representations. With the women building in the city, with his own great complex. I mean, Süleymaniye is just amazing. Outside of sponsoring his mother's great complex, he really was building imperially. Just think of other things that he did in the city. I'm trying to think. And then after him, Sultan Ahmet Cami. I mean, look at these monuments you have. So I think he was definitely physically expanding, what do I want to say? I'm kind of stuck with words here. Kind of a whole horizon. And Hürrem is doing that too with her. And so, and then his what do you want to call them? His viziers, and then, the governors that he sends out, they're building too. I mean, there's just building all over the place. I mean, you go to Aleppo, 1, 2, 3 Ottoman mosques. So it's an age of physical display.
Yeah.
For them too. I mean, it's an age of doing that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was also in the Imperial Harem book you were mentioning, like how Ottomans were actually great manipulators of space and, visual display of their power in their ceremonies. And also when it comes to the Süleyman period, maybe all these physical examples of, construction work and, the crown that was a Western symbol that was again being used as a way of showing his stance as almost like a world ruler.
I forgot to say something about the crown. First, I thought we were talking about the TV show.
No.
And I'm not watching it. So yeah.
Crown.
I mean, the crown comes to him. The crown is a gift to him. But as far as I know, I mean, this is from Necipolo's work, of course. I don't think he wears it. I mean, I think it's probably a treasure that goes in his treasury. I have to go back and read Necipolo. So that was a gift to him.
Yeah.
If I remember rightly.
Yeah, I think it was a gift of Ibrahim, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe we can just have one last question, and this is about the Imperial Harem. The education, what can you say about the education in the Imperial Harem? and at the same time, education of the public at the time of Hürrem, in the age of Süleyman, what was the public education was like, and how these women in the imperial harem, what type of education that they were receiving.
Well, we have all these mektebs, and then we have madrasas for boys in the period. I'm talking about your general population, you know, and if you're in the village, you have, I mean, you can imagine, you have, you know, a village teacher. I could go on and on about that, but I won't. So when education of Hürrem, when I wrote a chapter on the third chapter in the book, I realized that this is like a girls' seminary. I mean, up at 2, make your bed, do this, you know, now attend this class. It was incredibly regimented, and everybody's learning, you know, needlework, like I said. I'm sure she would have had, probably individual tutoring. I mean, she had to learn Turkish pretty fast, and she had a child pretty fast. I also imagined her growing up with, let's just say, Mehmet, her first child, but then her boys go on, and Mihrimah has a teacher. So she's there, maybe she's saying, do your homework, tell me what they said. She's getting an education with her children. I'm just assuming all this. And when she is marked for potential concubinage, when they're like, she's smart enough, she's clever, she's healthy, she's beautiful, you know, and let's get Süleyman interested. Maybe his mother is, you know, making sure she's being, so I'm sure her training was intense and just went on and on and on. I don't know what to say more there. She had to learn all about Islam. I mean, she's going to learn that on a daily basis, but she's going to have to know some stuff, right? Her prayers. She's going to have to know the history of the Ottomans. So I'm sure she was chock full of information. That does not answer what's going on outside of the palace. Oh, my phone is ringing. So, you know, her endowing a primary school, of course it's for boys, not for girls, but I think that's a move. I mean, that must have been kind of a, what do you want to say, a stimulus for other people to endow. She's probably talking to people, you know, make a school, we need more schools. I don't know. I know, okay, so that's what I know about that. I'll just quickly say, you know, I did write a book on Antep, and I had to think about education. And I think there were these, I know for women, there, you know, an older woman would, you know, pull together, she'd get usually someone knowledgeable with the Quran and, you know, the faith, and then call these young women in, and, you know, they would have a teaching session. So I don't know how much voluntary, let's have a gathering here in my house, and it will be a kind of a teaching. Madrasas going up in this period, certainly making, you know, formal education more possible. Is that sort of an answer? Is there more that I should answer here?
No, I think
Why did you write
there are two more questions. I don't know whether, you know, you would like to take them as well. I don't want to tire you out, but one question is about how your interest in the Ottoman Empire started, and the other one is whether you're reading the Ottoman documents yourself.
Oh, I always read the Ottoman documents myself. But in the beginning, I'd have to go talk to all kinds of people. Could you read this word say? So there was a lot of that. Yeah, I always read them myself. You know, there was a day when that's all you could do because you couldn't get photocopies. Mm-hmm. It's harder for, yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. I now forgot the first part.
And the other one is, how did your interest started
for
Empire? How did you started working on this topic?
Okay, this has nothing to do with academia. When I finished college, I went in the Peace Corps. Do people nowadays know about the Peace Corps? You're sent.
So.
I'm sorry?
I guess so, probably.
Barış Gönüllüsü?
Yeah,
That's what.
Barış Gönüllüsü.
I mean, it still exists. So this was kind of a little bit, I didn't say this, and do not repeat it, but it's a kind of humanitarian propaganda from the United States. So people like me, you know, I was what, 21. I wanted to go in the Peace Corps. And so you're assigned to a certain country, not in Western Europe. And you go live in the town or the city. Some people live really in, you know, villages, and you're supposed to do good work, whatever that is. So I wanted to go to Morocco, but then the Moroccans didn't want women. And then they said, "Do you want to go to Turkey?" And I'm like, "Sure, I don't know very much." And I went to Gaziantep, and I spent 2 years in Gaziantep and totally fell in love with Turkey. Just, you know, so I have a long history there. And folk tales in Gaziantep, I mean, people were always telling you the folk tales, so you get sort of popular history. So that's how I got started. And then when I, you know, then I went back to get my PhD, and then I had the experience, the bad experience with the one professor, and I don't remember when I got interested in this topic. Probably in graduate school. So it's because I went to Gaziantep. And I wrote a book about Gaziantep, as Zeynep told you.
That's a wonderful trend. I think this is a very nice way to wrap up, you know, moving from Hürrem to your own story about how you got interested in the Ottoman history. But thank you very much, Leslie, for being with us this evening. And thank you everyone for joining us for the book talk. And for those of you who needs a reminder about the book, the English book, Empress of the East, How a European Slave Girl Became the Queen of the Ottoman Empire, came out in 2017 from Dayton. And it is also available at ANAMED Library. And the Turkish translation appeared last year in 2019 from İş Bankası Kültür Yayınları, and it's entitled Hürrem Sultan. So thank you again. Maybe if you have one or two things to add, and then maybe we can hand over to Ayşe.
Well, the one thing I want to say is I am so grateful to you. I just want to thank you so much. You read my book, and then you know it better than I do. And, you know, we talked about what topics we exchanged. I mean, I feel that you worked so hard on this and so well. And I'm just so happy that you were able to do this. So thank you so much. And you were excellent at this, you know, guiding us through this conversation. So all clap. Can we all clap?
No, thank you. I mean, I am very much honored, and it has been a fascinating read, and I have been a follower of your work for such a long time that now, you know, this came as a wonderful opportunity, and thank you for really taking the time and being with us tonight, and, you know, telling us all about your fascinating work. And I hope we'll get to meet again for another book or another work of yours soon.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
And now I want to thank Ayşe for inviting me. Thank you so much, Ayşe. And all of you who made this possible. I mean, everybody who helped getting me in tune for doing this, you know, technologically. But thank you so much. It was a wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Leslie. It has been a pleasure to listen to you both. And I also would like to thank all those people who joined this session and contributed with their questions. I think that has been also a wonderful exchange. And I would just like to say once again that we will release a sound recording of this session on the SoundCloud webpage of ANAMED. So there will be an opportunity to look through this session once again, or for those who have missed this session. And I also would like to say that we will soon release our program for 2021. So it will be out soon, and we will announce what we will be doing next year in terms of these webinars. And on that note, I would like to thank everyone again and hope to see you in January's talk. So maybe you can all join us again then. So goodbye and iyi akşamlar. Hoşça kalın.